The next speaker I'd like to introduce is Dr. Caroline Hamm. She is the Chair of Oncology at the Windsor campus Schulich School of Medicine. She is the Clinical Research Director of the Windsor Cancer Research Group, working to enhance both local and cross-border research initiatives. She is the Chair of the Windsor Regional Hospital Research and Academic Committee and the leading complex hematology program development in Windsor. She sits on a number of regional, provincial, and national committees, and she is here to speak to us on clinical trials. Please welcome Dr. Hamm.
I just want to start by thanking all the speakers so far, Teresa and Katie. I just want to thank you for all the work you put into your organization. My sister-in-law passed away of esophageal CA when she was 36, and I can just imagine a face group like that, how much that would help her. And so just thank you. And Dr. Yang and Louis, such meaningful presentation, so thank you for that. So I'm the leader of a project called the Clinical Trials Navigator. We're from Windsor, so outside of Toronto, so don't have the same access to clinical trials as everybody does in Toronto. And we know that only 5% of cancer patients go on clinical trials, and everybody says it's always dismal, and what can we do to improve that number? We know that clinical trials are essential for the development of new treatments and new life-changing surgeries and systemic therapies. What we've done in the Clinical Trials Navigator, and that's the email, and you can actually email us and we'll help people find trials. So our job is actually to try to bridge that gap of trying to help people find clinical trials. And I'm going to go through all of the challenges that we found trying to help other people find clinical trials. So far we've helped about 250 people do searches for clinical trials. Is there a pointer on here? Is there a pointer on here, do you know? Probably not. So median age is 61, not surprising. Most male and female about the same. Most of our referrals have come from physicians. So physicians can refer to us, patients, caregivers, anybody can ask us to look for a clinical trial for you. Most are stage 4, so 70, in the yellow you can see 77% were stage 4 when they asked us to look for a clinical trial. And most have had at least 2 lines of therapy already. So most people have gone through their journey pretty far along and waiting for it. And you can see 30% had already had 3 to 5 lines of therapy. So they'd actually gone through lots of chemo already. In terms of who's referred to us, so you can see that breast cancer is one of the biggest, 16.9%, but in fact, breast cancer is 25% of cancers in Canada. So there's a smaller percentage of people with breast cancer looking for trials. Brain tumors was 9.7%, and that's actually only about 3% of all the cancers. I haven't separated stomach out, but stomach is obviously a small percent of cancers. I'm guessing about 3% of cancers in Canada. And so they would be more represented because there's fewer treatments. So I think that's probably why people that have fewer treatments are more likely to look for trials, which makes sense. So this just speaks to the success of the program. And I don't want to spend too much money on time on the percentages, but of the people where we did refer out for a clinical trial, so about 23% of people got referred out to a clinical trial. 1/3 of them were successfully enrolled on a trial. So I think that it speaks to our process of selecting clinical trials for patients, that we're not going to give you a gigantic list of things that that's not going to work for you. This is kind of the sad status of it. So of the people that are referred, they are asking for clinical trials after 3 lines of therapy. And so they're already pretty advanced in their disease. And the average time from referral to our program to the time that they passed away was less than 5 months. And that's not a good time to look for a clinical trial, because you're just not going to find the trial and get on the trial. And so there's something wrong with the whole system that we're waiting so late to look for a clinical trial, because it's simply not going to work at that point in the patient's journey. So this is the conclusion of my first part. So 80% were referred by physicians. That probably just speaks to the fact that we haven't done a lot of advertisement. The reason for that is we're in the process. We're working with an IT company. We've got enough money to build software that's going to speed up the process. But right now it's quite manual, so we haven't done a lot of advertisement. We think our website will be up and running by we were thinking January. I'm thinking closer to maybe June. We'll have a website up and running where it will have software that will do part of the work of doing a search for us. And we'll be able to service more people. And you're the first patient group we've talked to, so stomach cancer might come out on top. So the other thing is that rare tumors, such as brain tumor, probably stomach cancer, and I didn't go back into our database to look at it, are probably higher represented because there's not as many treatment options for you guys, so you're more likely to be looking for trials. Most have stage 4 when they're looking. I guess that's not a surprise, but obviously it would be nice to move the world so that we're not waiting till people are stage 4 before we put them on a trial that might have changed the trajectory of their disease. So we talked about this. This is the overall. So of all the people referred to us that we have numbers on, 11.5% went on clinical trials, interventional clinical trials that hopefully would change the course of their disease, which is much better than the average of 5%. So what we've done when we're doing this, we kind of look at the system we're working in, and we're starting to analyze the clinical trial system and what's going on in that system. So what we have found is that, and we just did a subsection of people to try to find how many people have a trial outside of their own province that they can't go to because they don't know how to get there. And so we had a patient in Vancouver. I found a trial in Toronto for them. I called the Toronto doctor and I said, could this patient go on trial? And they said, I don't know, you should know. And nobody knows. So we put a grant together to CIHR to try to at least clarify what's going on with cross-border referrals for patients. It's kind of crazy in this free healthcare system that we have in Canada that it's actually probably easier to cross states than it is to cross provinces for clinical trials. We did our early research find out Princess Margaret takes health coverage from other provinces, but they don't clarify if that's for clinical trials. The doctors I've talked to in Toronto, when I'm trying to get a patient from outside of Ontario onto a trial there, says that, that they make it work, but I don't know if they're slipping them under the door. Like, nobody really knows how it's working. And so, like, I really feel, so what we're trying to do, and we put a grant in to try to at least clarify what's going on. So we can put on a website and say, this is the process, this is what you have to do to go to Vancouver or Toronto or wherever, outside of your own province for a clinical trial. Not as big a deal for Ontario, but Prince Edward Island has 7 clinical trials for all their cancers. That's a huge deal. And so it's, Saskatchewan has I think we have the numbers actually here. So these are the Ontario, Quebec, PEI, and Newfoundland, the number of clinical trials for lung cancer, breast cancer, prostate, and colorectal. So you can see there's a real healthcare discrepancy in Canada if there's not a clarity around their ability to cross provincial borders for trials, and it's not there. There's no clarity, I'll tell you. I worked with CCTN, which is a national clinical trials network, and there's no clarity around it. So anyway, that's what we're trying to build. In terms of where our patients come from and where they go to, we started this in Windsor, so most of the patients are Windsor-based at this point, but we have people from across the country that have used the system, and most people go to big centers. Not a surprise, that's where most of the trials are. So most go to the big centers in their own provinces, like most Ontario patients go to Princess Margaret, London, Ottawa, Hamilton. So this is the other thing that I think it will give you guys a little bit of comfort in knowing that this system really is hard to figure out, because it is. So we did a critical analysis of the clinical trials website. So everybody knows clinicaltrials.gov. It only started in the year 2000. It's a relatively new program, clinicaltrials.gov, started by NIH in the United States. It was not built for patients. It was built so researchers would have somewhere to put their research so they could publish it. It is not a patient-friendly website, which anybody that's ever used it knows that, right? And so what we did is we looked at I have 5 navigators that do searches for me. You can see the similarities of the search terms in the top purple box and the bottom purple box. They're almost identical. And yet when they did the searches, they found completely different answers. In fact, and that's the last thing you want to do is miss that one trial. That's the trial that's good for you. And so the searches are not reliable. In fact, yesterday I was talking to one of my navigators and the computer crashed while he had done a search. He had the results the first time and he had 17. He did the same search again with the same search terms and came up with 2 less trials. And he couldn't figure out why. And I've done the same thing myself. So it's a really tough system to work on. So we have come up with what we think is an answer, at least the first answer. And you know how things go. You find your first answer and then you make it better and better with different iterations. But in the end, I'll show you what we've done is develop master lists of cancer sites. So what we've done is we do all our searches, we put all our searches into one master list, and that master list is what we go to, and we update that master list once a month. Rather than, I think it's actually a detriment to do a search each time for each patient because I think you're missing things. And I noticed that when I was reviewing them, I realized how come this person has 15, they're almost the same people. He has 15 searches and this guy has 15 trials and this person has 3 trials. It's just, so anyway, the master list I'm hoping will answer this problem. And I do have a stomach cancer master list at the end of this. So then, yeah, and this is just another example. So each of the bars is a different navigator, and you can see the blue navigator is sometimes finds more, sometimes finds less, but there's never finding, the different navigators never find the same number of trials for people. Then we looked at the different websites. So when we're doing searches, we search 5 websites. We do clinicaltrials.gov, CCCTN, Ontario Cancer Clinical Trials, QCRO, 4. There's only 4. So anyway, so we do the 4 websites. And so what's the weird thing about this is we will go to we will do a clinicaltrials.gov search, do the search, then we'll do a CCCTN search, and we'll find trials on CCCTN that are on clinicaltrials.gov, but we can't find them on clinicaltrials.gov. We can only find them on CCCTN. So again, it's just like nobody can feel bad about not understanding those websites because there are just so many problems with hidden trials. And so we're hoping the master lists will help kind of resolve some of this. This is just what we're looking at. QCRO, which is in the very middle of that, QCRO is actually a Quebec website, and they actually have the fewest problems. It's the newest and it's patient-driven website, but it's only Quebec. They have the best, we think, the best search engine so far. And then the other thing I want to talk to is I think the entire cancer system needs to step back and stop saying every person needs a clinical trial, because it's not practical, it's not realistic, and I think it's not fair to anybody. I don't think oncologists know. I'm an oncologist myself, and I used to always say, oh, every person with cancer needs a clinical trial. I just don't think it's a fair statement. And I think we need just a piece of reality on that. So you need to understand the phases of trials. I'm thinking most of you understand it, but I'm gonna walk through it. So a phase 1 trial is first in human. So they've tried it in a mouse. They figured out the dose in a mouse that treated a cancer in a mouse. Then they take it into humans at about a quarter of that dose. And then they slowly increase the dose until 3 people end up in hospital, and then they go back to the dose before that. And that's how we calculate a dose, all right? So when we're starting a phase 1 trial, it will take every cancer in the book. So if you go on clinicaltrials.gov and you see stomach cancer as part of a list of 10 other cancers, that's a phase 1 trial. They're trying it in everything to see which one it's going to work in. And so they do the 10 trials and they find out, oh, look at that. There were 3 stomach cancer patients that responded. Let's go to the phase 2 trial and trial only in stomach cancer patients at the dose we figured out. So that's the point of a phase 1. So all of the breast and lung and prostate and those guys didn't get any response at all to that trial. So I would never send a patient from Windsor to Toronto for a phase 1 trial, not if they're coming to me in the last half a year of their life. I want them to be with their family, and I don't want them to be contributing to science. I want them to be, if they're going to get benefit, maybe a phase 2, maybe a phase 3 trial, But a phase 1, it's not in the patient's best interest. Phase 2 is trying it generally in patients that it's already been proven in phase 1 at the dose they tried before, and they're trying to figure out what are the side effects then. If we use this dose and we expand it to 200 people, what are the side effects of that drug? Phase 3 is where we're taking it, now we prove it in phase 2, look at in that trial, 60% of the stomach cancer patients responded. So we're gonna take it and we're gonna compare it to what we would normally give a person and see if this new one is better than the one we would normally give to a person. Phase 3 is the best trial to get into. Phase 4 is where we're trying to take it out and we're trying to teach doctors how to give a drug. So phase 4 is like, it's established already. Phase 4 is a no-brainer. That's a good trial to go into. So what we do in Clinical Trials Navigator is we search these websites for clinical trials. The navigators, who are obviously not oncologists, will go and they will give me a list of potential trials. Myself and another doctor right now go over the trials and we filter it out based on what we think. We usually lose about 3 or 4 trials with that second filter, which I think is really important because we don't want to send because of this. So if I give you a list of 5 trials and you take that to your oncologist and the oncologist looks at the first 2 and says, this is stupid, they're not going to look at the last 3 because nobody has that kind of time. So what we do is we give you 1 trial or 2 trials or 3 trials that we've vetted. These look very reasonable for you. And that's what you take to your oncologist to say, what about these? And it's just more likely to work that way. So I think that we call it curating clinical trials. That last, making sure that this is a good trial for you to take to your doctor, I think is really important. Or even giving it to a doctor. We have a lot of doctors ask us for this process too. And if we give them a list of 15 trials, they're not going to look at them. I'm a doctor. I know nobody has that kind of time. And so we give you the best and shortest list possible. So when we do this, so the first graph, A graph, is the number of trials that the navigators find, and on average it's about 5. And then of that, the number of phase 1 trials, the average is 1, but sometimes we find up to 7, 10 phase 1 trials. But again, phase 1 trials, first in human, be careful about them. They're not worth traveling out of town for. And then the number of potential 1, 2 trials is very similar. The number of potential phase 2, 3, and 4 trials per patient was 1. So on average, we find 1 trial for a person. That's a reasonable trial for that person. But again, the success rate of finding that trial is, if you give you a trial, you have a 36% chance of getting on a trial then, which we think is good. So I'm almost ending here. So this is our master list for clinical trials, and we're happy to give you a link and put it on your website. And so what everybody knows links. So now that blue part is a link. You can touch it. That will take you to clinicaltrials.gov, and then you can look at the eligibility and everything like that. The first one is the phase 1, 2. That shouldn't be in this list, but these are first, and we categorize it as to where you are in your journey. So the first line metastatic, so that'd be the very first treatment you have. These are the trials that are available, and this is where they are open. So again, we don't know if we can get you into Quebec, but we're willing to make a phone call and see, and we have had people kind of get accepted there. I had a patient was accepted at Quebec. They wouldn't really want her. They tried to get her into Toronto, but it's something that it's worth thinking about. Then the first line prior to any treatment. So there's these, and we are trying to work with a new way of trying to get this into the doctor's hands, because every doctor, at least in Ontario, has multidisciplinary rounds. We go to at least twice a month where we present our patients, and if we can get this in the hands of the doctor earlier, we're hoping that this is a way that we can get this kind of trial, because this is the problem. Prior to any treatment, almost everybody's at a treatment before they start looking for trials, but there are trials out there that we need people to try to be aware of, but I need the doctors to be aware of that, because by the time they've met you and decided on a treatment, then that's too late. Second line trials, 1 second line trial. There were no third-line trials. So if you've had 2 treatments already, there were no stomach third-line trials that we were able to identify. Non-interventional trials, we're listing them here if you want them. That's, these are just kind of observational, just telling your story, maybe doing some molecular work, but there's no intervention for you. And then the last category we have is phase 1 trials. Again, first in human. Not guaranteed to help you, but there are some out there. So there's quite a few phase 1/2 trials that you can look at. Phase 1/2, I'm a little nervous referring for phase 1/2 because I'm not sure if they've moved into the phase 2 part of it yet. And that's not on the website. So it's something you can look into, but that's the next kind of work that needs to be done. And then the other thing, there's lots of phase 1 trials. The other thing I wanted to show you was this, I got my new glasses on. Okay, these are all PMH still. I think that's the last slide though. Yeah, so there are trials at NIH. We didn't find any for stomach, but National Institute of Health in Bethesda, Maryland, takes Canadian patients for free. I actually had a patient flown down every 3 weeks for her treatment. And so it's just something to keep in mind. It's a free treatment and at NIH. Okay, I think. So this is our flyer. Our website's not running yet. That QR code actually works. We tried it. You could probably look it up right now and put it on your phone. And so the first, and we can give this to you for your website as well. The first part of it is an EDI survey, so equity, diversity, inclusion. It asks questions like your sex, your race, your income. We got criticized that we didn't know who we were helping. And so we've added this so we can say, okay, if we're missing a part of the population, then we need to go and help those people. So we've added that, and then it'll take it to your cancer. You fill out, the treatments you've had so far, and then we'll get back to you with a list. If that doesn't work, just go to the email and just email us directly, and that'll work too. Clinical Trials Navigator at the WRH is Windsor Regional Hospital. So with Clinical Trials Navigator at wrh.on.ca. That's part of my group. It's not the whole group, but we've added a man. But yeah, so that's the people that are helping us. We've had lots of financial support and really lucky that way. So that's the end of my talk.